So, a lot of buzz around Dune recently, and of course, whenever there's a big film that comes out with headline actors like Timothy Chalamet or Timothée, as he says his name is pronounced, which I guess we should do. People start doing some fan casting whenever it is that there's someone that they love, and it happens enough as it is in the fan base. But Timothy actually had some comments on this. Somebody asked him a bit of a question about like, well, would you ever do a superhero film? And his response was, when he was doing the film with Don't Look Up with Leonardo DiCaprio, he gave him a piece of advice, which was, don't do drugs, great advice, and don't do superhero films. Uh, Leonardo DiCaprio, I mean, look, that's advice he gave. I have nothing against him for giving that advice. If he doesn't like it, it's not his thing, or he doesn't want the pressure of taking on a role and taking on the fan base who can be very chaotic and sometimes unnecessarily brutal. If you want to stay away from that, that's perfectly fine. And Timothy Chalamet, for the most part, has followed that advice. But he actually ended up saying he was actually the whole reason he was inspired to get into acting was because of his experience watching Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. And I think for anyone who watched that film in the cinemas, that experience was just so impactful. Seeing someone, I remember that experience watching him and just being like, who is this? This isn't Heath Ledger. This is someone else. This is so powerful. This is so amazing. His role in that was just out of this world. And Timothée Chalamet was inspired by this. And what he goes on to say is, essentially, if he came across the right script, he would do it. I thought today, just to have a bit of fun, let's run with it and see if there were any roles I think, personally, Timothée Chalamet would do well in. I've come up with a few. Some of them are DC, some of them are Marvel, but I thought I'd just run some of them with you guys because I think there is potential here for him to do these characters extremely well. So the first one being is the Scarecrow. Chalamet's body, he's got a skinny kind of body. He's not like your buff, brawny kind of character. And the Scarecrow is that exact kind of body type. There's also a lot of elements. We've had Cillian Murphy play the Scarecrow to great effect in Batman Begins. And seeing Chalamet play this character, I think would be really, really enticing, especially seeing a transition from normal everyday person to this psychopath and seeing how that progresses and seeing how that happens. There's a lot of opportunity there to create it and make it your own. So it gives a lot of room for a lot of acting ability. Next, I'd say on the hero side, Nightwing. The part of me that hesitates about this is Nightwing is quite a physical character. He's buff. He's broad-shouldered, big muscles. That's not to say that Chalamet couldn't do it, but if you're carrying on with the kind of story of Nightwing, he does at one point take over the mantle of being Batman, and that's intimidating, And if you got someone who's kind of just tiny kind of character, I don't see that as being a necessarily perfect fit, but it's an interesting casting choice. I think there's potential there if they do it the right way and they tell the right kind of story. I think you could really do it justice. Another DC character I think would fit well is the Flash. The Flash hasn't yet been portrayed in a way on film in a way that I feel like, that is the Flash. This is him. You know what I mean? And you don't have, although in the comics everyone's drawn as being this buff, massive dude, and I understand why, but the Flash doesn't necessarily have to be, because his powers come from his speed. He's not like Nightwing, who relies on his strength and his agility and his being able to fight. The Flash relies on the Speed Force and on being able to travel extremely fast. So that could work really, really well, and I could see him portraying that Barry Allen character in a way where the death of his mother and that whole thing extremely well. Moving on to some Marvel characters, the Nightcrawler was one of the first ones that came up in my mind. The Nightcrawler is we saw him in X-Men for a little bit. We haven't been able to explore him fully, and I think that's an untapped character that has potential to become a mainstream general audience loved character. And I think Timothée Chalamet, he's got the hair already, don't have to do much there. And that could be a very interesting take on the character. And the last pick I have for Marvel is Gambit. I think would be really fascinating, and seeing how that could be explored, and him being part of the X-Men, and seeing that world done. I love Gambit. I think he's so awesome, and it's devastating to me that we haven't yet explored Gambit fully in the X-Men, and I'm hoping that we get to see that potentially as we move forward with Marvel. I really want to see that. That'd be great, and I think Timothy Chalamet could fill in those boots pretty well. So those are my picks for the characters in the Marvel and DC world. There is a kind of little asterisk with this, which is I think that if this is fan casting and stuff that we'd like to see, that I'd like to see, but as far as what I think Timothy Chalamet will do, I think he would go for an Elseworld story, something along the lines of Joker, something along the lines of maybe in Matt Reeves' The Batman, fitting in that world. I think is a better fit for him than potentially your kind of mainstream pop culture characters in the DCU and the MCU. So that's kind of my little star that I'd put there, just to kind of as a note. I don't see him playing these characters in an ongoing kind of reprising role over the next 10 years or something. It would be something that I think he'd do 1 or 2 movies and then he'd be done. But that's what my picks are. What do you guys think? Are there any of these picks that you agree with? Do any that you don't agree with? Who would you choose for some roles for him? And let me know in the comments below.